Welcome back live from the second floor of the Duncan Student Center. The Fighting Irish failed last week to take on Marshall and defeat them. However, they're wearing green this weekend, and they're looking to bounce back against Cal. We'll find out. Shamrock Sports Nation, let's ride. Welcome back here to the second floor of the Duncan Student Center. I'm Sam Ouhaj, joined alongside JJ Post and first-timer Cian Bagenstose. We're in for a fantastic episode today, and while Notre Dame lost to Marshall 26-21 last weekend, what went wrong, JJ?
I mean, what didn't go wrong? Here's the comprehensive list of things that didn't go wrong for Notre Dame on Saturday. The tight end group with Michael Mayer, that was good. Michael Mayer is always good. The secondary performed well. Tariq Bracy, Clarence Lewis, Cam Hart, all of those guys did their job. Everything else, not good enough. It was just, a performance where it felt like Notre Dame never got out of first gear. Notre Dame started off the game, kind of trying to play the same way they did against Ohio State. Control the pace of the game. Keep the ball on the ground. Play simple, effective, which is fine, except it didn't work. Notre Dame never got out of that first gear. Notre Dame never found that second gear, and really it felt like Marshall just wore them down instead of Notre Dame being the team that took advantage of the size disparity, of the talent difference. Notre Dame never really changed their game plan, never really adapted the game, and as a result, Marshall built their way into the game, and eventually Marshall, when the moment came, took advantage of it. They forced turnovers in key moments. They took advantage of those turnovers, and when Notre Dame had to play up against the back with their backs against the wall, it was their backup quarterback that had to do it, and as a result, they were unprepared and they didn't win.
Very solid points, JJ. Cian, what went wrong?
Well, I think Notre Dame, they kind of put a damp towel on the welcoming of the Freeman era. The quarterback threw 3 picks. We couldn't get balls off. Estime, Diggs, and Tyree combined for only 50 yards. No one except Mayer and Lorenzo Silence had 20 yards receiving. Our defense couldn't tackle. We let 163 yards to a running back I'd never heard of before. And it seemed like the Marshall players were made to gel a little bit. And just a little underwhelming performance, but I think we'll move by and we'll get back at it next week. And on a positive note, the dining hall food is very good.
Well, yeah, there was a lot of negatives this weekend, but thank you for the dining hall food and North Dining Hall, South Dining Hall. However, staying on that tone of optimism, we're kicking it over to Kieran about where we go from here.
The Fighting Irish football team has gotten off to a rough start, to put it mildly. After a shocking loss to the Marshall Thundering Herd, some people are already clamoring for Marcus Freeman to be fired. As Notre Dame fans, we find ourselves asking this question: where do we go from here? Following Brian Kelly's departure, Freeman had sky-high expectations from Irish fans after hearing rumors about the energy he immediately brought to the practice field and the recruiting trail. However, the Freeman era has begun with 3 consecutive losses, with the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma State last year and Ohio State and Marshall to kick off the new season. Notre Dame was expected to compete for a championship, coming into the season ranked 5th in the AP poll. So what happened? It is important to remember that succeeding as a head coach at the highest level of college football is a daunting task. Freeman is manning the sidelines with 0 experience at head coach at any level. At 36 years old, he will need time to adjust to being the head honcho. Even the most successful coaches in college football history had growing pains to open their careers. A familiar yet controversial face for Notre Dame fans is a perfect example of how patience can pay dividends. Brian Kelly went 8-5 in his first full season as the Fighting Irish head coach, including a loss to Tulsa, which is in the same conference as Marshall. Kelly would go on to become the winningest coach in Notre Dame history. And the man who many regard as the single greatest college football coach of all time, Nick Saban, provides another instance of how difficult it is to inherit a program and succeed in year 1. In his first year at Alabama, the Crimson Tide went 7-6, with one of those defeats coming at the hands of lowly Louisiana Monroe. And now, Saban has Alabama considered the mecca of college football. Not to mention, both Kelly and Saban had many years of coaching experience before their stints with Notre Dame and Alabama, respectively. As Fighting Irish fans, we must maintain belief in the plan that Marcus Freeman and his staff have instilled, and cheer on the team as they continue to give everything they have for the remainder of the season. We are lucky to root for such a storied program, and it is our job as Notre Dame community to inspire confidence in our football team. With NDTV, I'm Kieran Cantwell, sending it back to the studio.
Thank you very much for that wonderful analysis, Kieran. And speaking on optimism, this is a big week for backup quarterback, now starting quarterback after the injury to Tyler Buckner, Drew Pine. What are we expecting from him today, JJ?
It is time now officially to ride the pine. This is, I think, for a moment for Notre Dame, it felt like we've been on the verge of for, a year and a half now. It felt like all last season where it's like, oh, we're going Cone, Buckner, Pine. Which of the quarterback carousel is going to turn this week? And that never happened. Eventually, we settled on Cone, and the team steadied out once we found our steady quarterback. Hopefully, this season, the same thing's about to happen. We've had some Buckner. Buckner played well. I want to be clear here. I've seen a lot of, revisionist history with Buckner. He did it about as well as anyone could have been expected a quarterback to play in his first ever start versus Ohio State on the road in Columbus. And against Marshall, Buckner was not the problem. Buckner played fine. He didn't play perfect by any means, of course, because, he's making his second career start. But he played fine. He was not the problem against Marshall. Now it's time to, kind of move on because you can't. Buckner is no longer available, and you've got to go to the next guy up. And I think one of the benefits of Drew Pine being the next guy up is you have a quarterback who is in competition for the starting job and, as such, knows the playbook a little more. He's a little more experienced, having come in as a, almost like a relief pitcher role. You play the Enter Sandman, play the trumpets for Edwin Diaz. That's what we're going back to. It worked last year. Maybe this year we'll get a similar sort of vibe with him. I think with Drew Pine, like I said, the biggest benefit is the playbook does not need to be contracted, at least not in theory, because Drew Pine, one would imagine, probably knows the playbook a little bit better than any other backup quarterback in this country does because he spent the entire offseason competing with that same playbook, learning that same playbook, and acting as if he would have the starting job. His time is now. He tell you he has a chip on his shoulder. I believe he said he had a boulder on his shoulder, in fact. He's got plenty to prove. He was in the competition all spring, all summer. He lost that competition. He's now coming back out, and his job is to lead Notre Dame to, whatever the best case scenario for this is. It's going to be a bowl game. It's going to be a New Year's Six bowl game. Is it going to be? No, it's not going to be a playoff. I'll say you that. But, if you're Drew Pine, you're coming in knowing you have 10 games to make your case to next year be the starting quarterback, when Buckner is healthy, and 10 games to kind of carve out your legacy. Drew Pine's tenure as Notre Dame quarterback so far in his time at Notre Dame has been defined by being the reliever, the backup guy. And now, for the first time in his career, he is the undisputed starter. I don't think there's anyone. Steve Angeli, for what it's worth, played very well in the spring game, but I don't think anyone with any shred of realism is saying Steve Angeli should start a game this season. So I think if you are Notre Dame, you are in a position where you have to bring your backup quarterback in, but you are in a position where that backup quarterback is perhaps more than any other backup in the country, more knowledgeable of the playbook, more knowledgeable of what he wants to do as quarterback at Notre Dame. And I think if you're Drew Pine, this is a perfect opportunity. You got 10 games to prove yourself, 10 games to prove yourself as Notre Dame's starting quarterback in 2024, 10 games to bring Notre Dame back to top 10 contention. And I think if you're Drew Pine, there's plenty of motivation to do that. And the question now becomes, how does that, motivation execute on the field? How does that translate in terms of talent? How does that translate in terms of how Tommy Rees calls the plays for Drew Pine? Because I think above all else, this is going to be a Tommy Rees game as much as it is Drew Pine, because Tommy Rees' job is to change the game plan. Buckner's strength as a quarterback was he could run the ball. He could expand the game with his legs. He could make stuff happen once the pocket collapses. Drew Pine's not that kind of quarterback. He's more of a pocket passer. He's capable of his legs. He's no Jack Cohn. He can make stuff happen in the open field, but he's not a quarterback you're going to design runs to. You're not a quarterback you're going to game plan around having that dual option. But so if you're Tommy Rees, last two games have been an unmitigated disaster in terms of play calling. The offense can't get started. You're having 20 points a game against Marshall and Ohio State. One of the two is acceptable, the other is not. And you basically can't get anything going in the air. Other than Mayer and Stiles, who are averaging 8.3 yards per play, everyone else in the offense is averaging 3.1. That is not acceptable if you are the Notre Dame offense, at least not if an offense that wants to compete to go to a New York Six Bowl. So if you're Tommy Rees, you need to change what the offense is doing. You can't game plan like you have Tyler Buckner at quarterback. That weapon no longer exists. You need to game plan around the quarterback you have. You need to make the play short, efficient, make it simple, get Drew Pine involved quickly, get him acclimated to the game quickly, and if Drew Pine can grow into the game, then Notre Dame should grow into the game, and if he doesn't, then we might be looking at Marshall 2.0.
I agree with you right there, and if it's anything, if we get the Drew Pine from Cincinnati and Wisconsin, I think we're in great hands. Cian, you haven't seen Drew Pine on the field yet. Now you're finally seeing him. What are your expectations?
Well, I think Drew Pine's he's very he's very hit or miss. Like obviously, he has a very high ceiling as he led Notre Dame to the big 28-point fourth quarter explosion against Wisconsin. But he's also had tremendous lows as he threw 3 picks in the spring game, and in the first in the first pass against Marshall, he threw an interception right to the linebacker. So I feel Drew Pine's very hit or miss. But Freeman has really praised him on his leadership and work ethic, which that can really help the young Irish team as they're trying to find their identity and gel and really step up to the plate. Because obviously, but now with Buckner hurt, Drew Pine and Buckner they're both two very parallel quarterbacks, and both have tremendous upside, but also have downside. It's just, can Tommy Rees call the plays to capitalize on Drew Pine's upside? And can Tommy Rees best situate the playbook to where Drew Pine's strengths will be utilized and capitalized and not on his weaknesses?
Very solid points. Drew Pine is going to have to play like the MVP for the Fighting Irish. Speaking of MVPs, the new Big Three of NDTV Shamrock Sports looks into early season NFL MVP.
Interesting take.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new era of American television.
Welcome to our segment, No.
You're interesting.
Tonight we are down in Yaz's, the restaurant in the basement of the Morrissey Manor. We're going to ask the people what they think about this year's early season pick for NFL MVP.
And if they're wrong, I guess they're just...
Interesting. Got a question for you. Who is your early season pick for NFL MVP? Hey, Nick.
Off the top of my head, I know.
Give us a name. I got a question for you.
NFL MVP. I do think Josh Allen could take it home this year. I think he's got the weapons. I think he's got the offensive playbook to do it. I don't think any other QB is really stepping up right now.
Aaron Rodgers.
Josh Allen.
He had a rough week 1, but he'll fix it. You know, the receivers, they'll get to it. They'll get to it.
Okay, so Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, who are his receivers?
Give me names.
Yeah, give me names, please.
Toddlers. Right now,
I'm not a fan of this guy. Guys, so who is your early season pick for Super Bowl champion?
Look, there's certain things that you can't quantify in numbers, and that's grit. And you know who's got the best grit in the league? The Lions. Give me the Detroit Lions to win the bowl.
Love it. That's a good take.
It's got to be Steve Angeli. He's going to tear it up next weekend.
This is delicious. I gotta be a big Geno Smith guy, in all honesty.
Luscious.
I'm going to go Saquon Barkley.
Scrumptious. Jameis Winston. Affordable.
This man right here plays an honest game. He plays an honest game.
Mr. Vice President is in the building. Give me a name.
Hey, this man, he's hiding from the cameras. He's hiding. Let's see what he has to say.
Saquon Barkley. That's easy money.
Hey, he's hiding.
Pats.
One of those. He's one of those guys.
And evaluating some of the performances from the games, Drew Pine, of course, we've talked a lot about, Isaiah Foskey.
Hey, this guy plays an honest game.
A guy we haven't gotten a lot of feedback on is Johnny Manziel, of course, the star linebacker.
Lord have mercy.
Give me your opinion on his performance.
I mean, I thought he was looking pretty good. He was stopping things up pretty well, so yeah.
He's one of those guys. We don't like those guys.
You think he's the future of Notre Dame football?
I'm not quite sure he's the future yet, but he's getting there.
Thank you, sir.
Carson Wentz.
We say.
No.
You're interesting.
We'll see y'all next week. Same place, same time.
Well, thank you very much for saying that I'm interesting. But no, in all seriousness, there's a lot of MVP talk going around. And now if you're Tommy Rees and Marcus Freeman, you're looking for MVPs all around the field. How do you go about this, Cian?
Well, obviously, we know Tommy Rees has not had the greatest play calling over the past 2 weeks. You know, against Ohio State, we had the QB draw in the 3rd and 18. We're kind of running the ball when we need to pass it, or passing the ball when we need to run it. And we just need to call better situational plays. And honestly, the bad play calling combined with the bad line plays leading to a stagnant run and pass game. So what Notre Dame needs to do is they need to start rotating some offensive linemen in. We need to get some new faces in there that better fit with the scheme, and to get some urgency going with the Irish lineup to show people that no one's job is safe. We also, like you said, JJ, we need to spread the ball out more. We can't keep throwing it to Mayer and Lorenzo Styles, because eventually teams are going to catch on to that, and they're going to start double teaming them. So we really need to spread the ball out more, and maybe it'll open up the run game. Maybe we start passing to Tyree, we start passing to Estime or Diggs. It's not working right now. Those 3 running backs have averaged 57 yards in the first game. That can't happen. And now Freeman. Now I know the Freeman era has not gotten out to the greatest start, but I can tell you, I've watched Freeman ever since he was at Cincinnati. He is the right hire. The players absolutely adore him. He is a tremendous recruiter. Again, the players absolutely adore him. And Father Jenkins himself said Freeman not only embraces the values of Notre Dame, but embodies the values of Notre Dame. He is a tremendous ability to build defenses. He's a very good technical coach. He is the right hire. He just needs time. I mean, he's going from a defensive coordinator to head coach is an extreme, huge adjustment. He's going to need time to develop. Do not bail on Freeman yet. I believe in Freeman. I love him, and you guys got to realize too, like the Freeman recruits don't come in until 2023. This is still Kelly's team, so it's going to take time for the Freeman era to officially begin, and the Freeman era will not begin until 2023. But if you right the ship and you wait for Freeman and you're patient, it'll pay off when we are raising that national championship trophy and wherever the national championship is.
You're certainly right, Cian. Rome wasn't built in a day. The same thing applies with the Freeman era. JJ, where do we go from here?
All right, Rome wasn't built in a day, but it was built on foundations. And that foundation for Notre Dame right now is Lorenzo Styles and Michael Mayer. I'm going to contradict myself in a bit. Don't spread the ball out. Feed the players who have produced. There are 2 players in the Notre Dame roster that are averaging more than 4 yards per play. Styles, Mayer. Give them the rock. Get playmakers in the space. Let them work. Because right now, you know, Cal is not a game you can take for granted. You took Marshall for granted. See where that went. You know, you have time to figure out what this roster is going to be going down the stretch, but you need a win. You need to set the ship straight right here and now. That means giving the rock to the players that you know can produce. That means leaning on efficiency, leaning on players that you know can do the job, and making Drew Pine's job as easy as possible. That means getting playmakers in space, keeping routes short, keeping routes efficient, and most importantly, winning the game in the trenches. The offensive defensive lines were supposed to be the strengths of this team. This was an offensive line that I don't think anyone expected them to win a Joe Moore Award this year, but expected to be one of the better units in the country. Under Harry Heastan, you expected that line to develop. They brought back 5 starters, if you consider Blake Fisher, who started every game he was available for last year, a starter. It was an offensive line that has a lot of experience on the interior and 2 probable first-round draft picks on the exterior at tackle. It's a line that, for all that talent, for all that experience, has not been good enough. They need to get better push. They need to make the running backs' jobs easier. Estime's averaging 3 yards carry, gets hit 2 yards in the backfield, and then gains 5 yards out of it, but it only comes out to a total of 3. The math doesn't work. And if you're Notre Dame, you need to win the trenches first and foremost. That is Notre Dame's bread and butter. It has been Notre Dame's bread and butter for years. And on the defense side of the ball, the same applies. This was a defensive line that, returning Isaiah Foskey, returning Jason Adamalola, returning Justin Adamalola, returning Howard Kress, you expect them to get better push. You expect this to be a strength of the team. And so far, it has not been. It's a unit that, you know, hasn't been bad per se. You know, they're not terrible. They're not bad. But it's not been good enough to carry a defense that is basically putting out there every 5 plays and said, you know, keep on holding, keep on holding, keep on holding. At some point, you know, when the offense isn't performing to the level it does, the defense needs to be playmakers in their own. That means getting sacks. That means forcing turnovers. That means putting the ball in plus territory for Notre Dame. You know, the special teams have done a great job. John Sott especially. Shout out John Sott, who's done a great job putting the ball in plus territory for Notre Dame every time they have to punt. But ultimately, sometimes it's on the defense when the offense is performing to create chances for the offense. Make the offense get just put in the position to succeed, because the offense isn't exactly driving the length of the field over and over again. They need turnovers, they need sacks, they need X-factor plays. So far, we haven't had many of those. We've had a lot of, bend but don't break successes where the defense forces, 3 and outs or forces 6 and outs. Those are all good and all, but you need to get in a position where you make X-factor plays if you want to kind of put this offense in better position to succeed, because the offense itself is not going 80 yards in scoring. It's not going 75 yards in scoring. You need the defense to put them into plus territory, and if you need the defense to do that, you need to be better than bend, don't break. You need to be excellent, and you need to be dynamic. And so far, if you're Notre Dame, you're looking at a good defense, but one that needs to take the next step forward and be dynamic if you want to go back to a 10-2 team.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that's what I'm going to be watching this weekend is the trenches of the football. Make them play Notre Dame football, and that's running through Estime and Chris Tyree. When we think about some of the biggest Notre Dame wins, they're running in the trenches. If you think back to when Kyron Williams was still on this team and we beat Clemson, who scored the first touchdown of the game, excuse me? It was Kyron Williams. They need to get back to this fundamental football, especially now you're changing your quarterback. You're going to Drew Pine. He's not much of a runner. So like Tyler Buckner, you need to get the running game going. It's going to take a lot of pressure off Drew Pine, and honestly, I think this is where Notre Dame has its identity, is running the football. Now, while we are mentioning what we're trying to watch this weekend and where we go from here, our very own Tyler takes us to what we need to watch outside of Notre Dame football this weekend.
Welcome back to another edition of Watching the Weekend. I'm Tyler Reedy. Good to see you. Today we'll be discussing another loaded NFL slate, some intriguing non-conference college football matchups, and some pivotal series on the baseball diamond. Week 3 of the college football season begins with 6th-ranked Oklahoma renewing a former Big 8 rivalry in Lincoln, where Nebraska is playing its first game since firing Scott Frost. Number 12 BYU picked up a signature win last week, but they'll be tested with a road visit to number 25 Oregon and Bo Nix, who's coming off a 5-touchdown performance. Nicholas Singleton had a breakout rushing performance for number 22 Penn State, but but he'll have his work cut out for him against Auburn's stout defensive front. Miami has quietly crept into the top 15, and they'll look to tee off on a number 24 Texas A&M squad still reeling from a home loss to Appalachian State. Number 11 Michigan State travels to the Pacific Northwest this week, where they'll face a familiar foe in Washington quarterback Michael Penix Jr., who transferred from Indiana in the offseason. On to Week 2 of the NFL, where Tom Brady hopes to exercise his demons in an NFC South battle with New Orleans. The Saints are 4-1 against TB12 since he joined the Bucs. The Dolphins' defense had Mac Jones and the Patriots in a bind, but they'll be challenged with a Lamar Jackson passing attack that just dismantled the Jets. Cincinnati and Dallas are in tough spots to start the year. The Bengals committed 5 turnovers in an overtime loss to the Steelers, and the Cowboys will be without quarterback Dak Prescott for the next few weeks. The Cardinals and Raiders are in danger of falling behind early in the playoff race, as both offenses look to rebound from Week 1 letdowns in the Vegas home opener. Fighting Irish alum Equinemius St. Brown looks to find the end zone again this week, but Aaron Rodgers wants to prove that he still owns the Bears in this NFC North rivalry on Sunday Night Football. Just 3 weeks remain in the MLB season, and the Guardians are poised to take the AL Central. They just swept Minnesota on the road and now host the Twins in Cleveland for a 5-game series. Blue Jay shortstop Bo Bichette already has 7 home runs and 22 RBI in September. The Orioles will need to shut him down this weekend to stay alive in the wild card race. And the Phillies' quest to end an 11-year playoff drought will face a major challenge in Atlanta this weekend. These 3 games will absolutely feel like a playoff series, as all 6 starting pitchers enter with an ERA of 4.2 or below.
That's all for this week's edition. I'll now send it back to Sam Ouhaj and the fellas back in the studio.
Thank you very much, Tyler, for that. There's so much exciting stuff going on in sports this weekend, almost getting to that point where all 3 big leagues are playing at the same time, including college football. We're not quite there yet, but there is a lot to enjoy. But Notre Dame, this is a must-win game. You were 0-2 to start the season when many thought that you'd be 1-1 right now, even 2-0, some people almost beating Ohio State. However, what are you going with for the score this week, Cian?
Well, obviously, I mean, you can't tell me Notre Dame has less talent than Marshall. I mean, we have like 4 first-round picks. We have Foskey, Fisher, Patterson. We have Mayer. We have Joseph. We got Estime, Diggs. We got Lorenzo Styles. We're loaded. I just think what happened last week is Notre Dame, that we were too engulfed in the Freeman era hype, and we kind of forgot that we had a game to play, and we overlooked our opponent. Someone at lunch told me that it was a trap game that happened. We got a little trap game after Ohio State, which happens, but now, you know, we're moving on from it. We had a great week of practice. Freeman said it was a reality check. It's kind of like getting a bad grade on a paper. You really get hit like a ton of bricks, but, you know, you learn from it. We got that reality check done, and now the Fighting Irish they're going to return back to the Fighting Irish. We're going to fight again. We're going to come out hungry, angry. You know, Bo Bauer came out and said, like, he would die for Notre Dame football. They are fired up. Like, they're ready to go. I mean, they're going to come out hungry, angry, and they're going to be ready to right the ship here. We got Lou Holtz coming back. We have the luck of the Irish. We got Manti Te'o coming back. All the celebrities coming back. It'll be a brand new team because we're gonna do all the adjustments that you said, and it's gonna be a brand new team. And I got my Fighting Irish winning 30-16 against Cal. It's a must-win too because we're not fighting for the playoffs. We're still fighting for New Year's 6, and we're fighting for the future, getting ready and developing for that future.
Talk about getting me hyped. Cian, that just got me so hyped right now. I'm ready for it. JJ, are you bringing that energy too?
Listen, last week we cited the great Hulk Hogan last week we're making pop culture a thing, because this week what Notre Dame needs to do is, in the words of The Blind Side, run the dang ball. And not just run the ball, run it efficiently. Get the offensive line going, create push, show why you are the team with more 4 stars, more 5 stars, more first-round picks. Just make Cal bend to your will. That's something Notre Dame did a lot last year. When they needed to, they enforced the game at the point of the attack. They made Kyron Williams be the dominant factor. So far this year, they've tried to do it. It hasn't worked. It's going to be imperative for Notre Dame to do that against Cal. And I think this is a Cal defense that has been way better than people are giving them credit for. I believe they're 25th in SP plus projections. That's very good. That's better than Marshall by a whole lot. So it's going to need some level of offensive step up as well as defensive solidity to win this game. But I think if Tommy Rees adjusts like I know he wants to, I don't think Tommy Rees said in the press conference this week, put the blame on me. Now, that's good. Talk the talk. Now it's time to walk the walk. Change the game plan, change the point of attack, and if Tommy Rees does that, which I think he will, Notre Dame's offense should take a step forward. They'll be ready to go against Cal. They will beat a Cal defense that is more than capable, and the defense will do a good job shutting down a Cal offense that thus far hasn't really proven itself. If the defense does its part, plays to their usual standard, the offense takes a step up. They win the game in the trenches. They win the game at the point of the attack. Notre Dame will control this game and win 24-13. If not, once again, we'll have bigger problems than the bias on this desk.
I agree with you, JJ. This is a must-win game. We're going to have to see Tommy Rees really revolutionize this game plan. We have a new quarterback in with Drew Pine, but he's been there. He has that dog in him, as you might want to say.
Get the X-rays out. Get the X-rays out. He's got the dog in him.
But regardless of that, if you're Notre Dame and you come out here and you lose this game, this is an awful look. I don't have them losing, but I mean, you do not want to lose this game and start 0-3. They're already 0-3. Technically, if you want to count the bowl game, I'm not counting that. They're 0-2 right now in the Freeman era. There's just so much to be nervous about, but like Cian said, Bo Bauer came out and said he would die for the Fighting Irish. Manti Te'o is coming back. Lou Holtz is coming back. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of excitement for the Fighting Irish. Last week, you let it blow over, but you're back. You're fighting every single game the rest of the way. I'm taking a close one here. I have Notre Dame winning 21-17. I think this is a determination game, and this is really going to define the Fighting Irish for the rest of the season.
Yeah, this is a game where you kind of show your, you show where your grit is. If you're Notre Dame, you so far have had two games where, one, you looked like you were fighting. You looked like you were, able to go blow for blow with one of the best teams in the country. And the second, you look completely hapless against this is a Fun Belt respecting show. We respect the Sun Belt. We respect the Fun Belt and everything it does for mid-major football in America. That being said, if you're Notre Dame, a team with aspirations of New York Six, you cannot be losing games to Marshall. So this is where, you've had your lumps. You've been set back. This is where you respond. This is where you show your grit. This is where you win the game in the trenches. You establish yourself, and you go out there and you rebound, and you start a winning streak from there.
Yeah, and I'm going to add something to that. So, we're not fighting. We're out of the playoffs. We're not fighting for next year. We're not fighting for 5 years. We're fighting for right now. The Fighting Irish, we're fighting to uphold the tradition of this university, and we're looking to send these seniors out who have given blood, sweat, and tears for this program in the best way possible. We're looking to do the best we can. Hopefully, we can get to New Year's Six. If not, that's okay. But we want to try our best to send these seniors out on the right notes and to get Freeman that well-deserved first win, because I love Freeman and I believe in Freeman. He is the right guy. He's just, like I said, he just needs time, but he needs a win, and we gotta go get that for him. We cannot lose to Cal. If we lose to Cal, then we got problems. But I don't think it's gonna happen. I think we were just distracted last week, and we're gonna be just fine. And go Irish, and we're winning 30-16.
And you hear those loud noises. However, it is Irish wear green this weekend. Hopefully they don't make us turn green. We're going with Notre Dame. This has been Shamrock Sports. Sam Ouhaj, JJ Post, Cian Bagenstose, Shamrock Sports, signing off.
Roll Irish.